Michelle LaFleur, and I'm a corporate service member specialist with the Chime Foundation. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's live webinar hosted by Optimum Healthcare IT. Before we get started with introductions, I would like to cover a few details. If you have difficulty listening to the live audio stream through your computer speakers, teleconferencing is available. To display teleconference instructions, click on the Communicate menu to view audio options. To start us off, I will hand it over to Seth from Optimum Healthcare team and welcome you all, and thanks again. Seth, I'm turning it all over to you.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Let me share my screen out here quick. And share. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Are we good, Michelle?
Yes, we are. We can see your screen. Okay. Perfect.
All right. Yeah, thanks for joining me today in this conversation. What is a virtual CISO and why should your healthcare organization considering hiring one? My name is Seth Fogie, as Michelle mentioned, and I'm a senior security consultant for Optimum Healthcare IT. This presentation was quite interesting to do, and I often jump into these opportunities because I learn a lot about the subject at hand, and in this case, it gave me some opportunity to critically think about the role of virtual CISO and to think about the ways that it really is an extremely valuable proposition for many organizations, especially in the current crazy world we live in with the remote workforce and with a lot of the challenges related to security and with the supply and demand aspects when it comes to the security workforce out there. So first, I am a member of Optimum Healthcare IT. We provide a lot of healthcare focused services. And this is the proverbial slide that it's not an advertising, but I just want to bring attention to the fact that the security element is integrated with everything else, and it's all healthcare focused. That's one of the main characteristics that makes Optimum a little different. Now, obviously, we're going to be focused on the security side in this presentation, and specifically the vCISO or virtual CISO services that are offered as part of the many service offerings that Optimum provides. So to start out, I kind of would like to take a step back and just get to a point of, how did I get to where I'm at? And also, how did the security industry get to the point where a virtual CISO was even a thing? I put this slide together because it kind of highlights the evolutionary process that's occurred over the last, I'll say 20 years when it comes to the security role, especially within healthcare. And it also uniquely parallels my experiences as a security expert in the field. So I've been doing security for 20 plus years, I want to say, IT a bit longer, but my start in security, I actually didn't even want to do computers back when I was looking for a career path. I exited school, went into the military, was enlisted as a nuclear engineer. I operated power plants on board carriers, big environment. I walked away with a lot of great experiences from that, but also a good understanding of systems, and system development and system maintenance. It's a very complex world. So during my time in the military, I got a degree. It was not in computers. It was actually in workforce education and development. Maybe why I like to do these presentations. But regardless, I had to get a computer in order to do that work. So I got the computer and I discovered that I had an affinity toward computers and toward specifically the security side. We'll call it security. I mean, everything back then, security related kind of had the words ended with the letter Z. If you were part of that community, wares and cracks and hackers and all that stuff. It was fascinating. It wasn't where I was particularly focused, but it was a fascinating world. So exiting the military with a degree, I could go into nuclear engineering, go into workforce education development, or go into computers. And I chose the computer path and entered the computer field as an ISP support person. And that was, again, it was another fabulous experience. Customer service and customer support was, the critical goal there. And I learned a lot more about the environments and PCs and how computers worked. But there was no security role back then. Really specifically within the ISP, there were network people, there were server people, but there was IS service desk people. But security was part of our role. We were taking phone calls from people that were dealing with viruses. They were dealing with malware. They were dealing with, back then, Trojans were popular, and they would take control of the PCs, and their CDs would go in and out automatically, and people would call up frantic about what was going on. Well, I worked there for a bit, got my MCSE back in that day. That was kind of like the ticket into an IT team, and was able to join a retail team that was about 5 people, and there was no security person. Security, again, was just part of that kind of bolt on, just what you did as part of everything else. Even at that time, there weren't really security people being hired in corporations. If you were the computer guru, you were also handed the security work. Now, in this case, I worked within that organization for about 10 years, but during that time, I continued to do a lot of side work related to security. I was helping, one of my first intros was to help people out on a antivirus forum. And I would answer questions, and the antivirus company noticed me and asked me to write a manual for their software. That led into some other projects. And then the owner of that company decided to start a security company focused on mobile security platforms, mainly the Windows mobile environment, if you happen to remember that. Now, again, I was maintaining my primary career as an IT guy, and this was a side job. But I spent a lot of time learning about computers, and that passion for security, it kind of tipped the balance, and I became primarily a security guy in the next couple roles, and eventually was able to enter into the healthcare system as a security admin. And at this time, many healthcare organizations were developing their security programs. There were security, in this case, the security team was only like about a year or so old. It was being led by a manager who wasn't a security expert. He was actually an HR type of manager, team development, team building, because this was a new team. And eventually I was able to work my way into a lead role and then a manager role, where I was pretty much reporting under the IT director leadership role. Security kind of actually shrunk at that time, and it went through some growth. And at the same time, though, there was the legal side of the equation, and there was a legal team, added a EMR. You now need a privacy officer. There was the governance risk compliance component to the security program that then ended up basically getting the tag on of the chief security officer, which was a requirement. So here we had 2 parallel teams, 2 parallel paths, and the organization had no CISO, so to speak. It did have a chief security officer, but that covered a lot of things, mainly focused on the privacy side. And they decided to move in the direction of a CISO, and then a merger occurred. And the healthcare organization I was associated to was absorbed by a larger one, which ironically had a smaller security team. But at that time, that security program, the leadership of that larger organization wanted to do the same exact things and build a security program. And they hired in an interim CISO, which ironically and purely coincidentally was one of my current peers at Optimum. And that role ended up helping to build the program, and then was turned into a CISO role. So, that's kind of the transition of what I've been through and how I've seen it evolve. And even within the larger program, that CISO role became overwhelmed. It's a large organization, so now there's a deputy CISO. But now for smaller organizations, that CISO role can't really, there's a lot of work that's required and a lot of challenges, and it brings to head a little bit of an opportunity, because there's not maybe enough resources, and as far as financial resources to bring a CISO in, there may not be enough work for a full-time CISO, but there's still the need. And speaking of the need, these are the challenges that are just currently facing us. Let's start with staffing. Staffing has become a critical issue in recent years. I just starting with the diversity and equity and inclusion. IT security is, to be honest, it's primarily dominated by males. And that misses out on a lot of opportunities there to bring a diverse environment in. There's definitely gains to be added by having a diverse group. And that means you need to have a CISO that's looking for that and growing a team and pulling people in from other areas of the organization that may not just be traditional pathing. The people that come in from colleges and stuff don't have experience. I consider myself really fortunate. I was able to grow up through many different technical aspects and was able to develop into that with a lot of good experience. Now with all the security programs out there, we're getting people, but they don't have the experience. And to be honest, sometimes there's a sense of entitlement that people feel like they are entitled to that $100,000 a year job coming out of college. A little bit of tension against that is that we do have staff shortages. So finding people is very hard, especially now that this remote workforce has started to grow into a reality. And the competition is fierce. In addition, there's a lot of compliance challenges that continue to grow and evolve. Regulations continue to develop, different privacy challenges. There's GDPR now. Even the EMR model itself within healthcare organizations is shifting from providing a central EMR that everybody comes to actually being an application service provider to communities. The technology aspects keep changing and growing complexity with the amount of data that's being absorbed, then the tools that are layering on top of that data, cloud and IoT and zero trust, and all these different technologies a CISO has to keep on top of in order to be able to provide the right solution for the organization. Not to mention the threats, which are coming in faster and are seemingly just experiencing this over the last several years. They're more intense. They're more significant. It seems like every month we have a domain name of a vulnerability, like Log4j or proxy shell or whatever it might be. And then you have nation states acting against us, and ransomware is a major threat, and the remote workforce. So if you've hopefully have seen one of these diagrams, and there's a couple different out there, but the CISO role is a very broad and complex role. And it requires passion. So, I hope you hear that I have a passion for security. I love this stuff. And it takes that passion in order to keep somebody engaged and not burn out. There's leadership elements that are unique to today's culture, to driving some of the changes that need to occur culturally inside of an organization. There's also the requirement to have healthcare experience. You can't just come into an organization and expect to unplug a device if it's infected with malware, especially if it's a hospital. You could be unplugging a patient device and cause a healthcare issue. There's also understanding that business acumen and how to deal with the operations teams, and recognizing that it's not a binary world when it comes to security. There's a lot of gray, and measuring that gray with risk, a risk-based approach is a critical piece. So, is it no wonder that the salaries are increasing, which makes a full-time CISO sometimes unaffordable, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. And they lose out on the value of having that leader and having the experienced person in that role, which brings us to the subject of a vCISO. So I ended up landing on this Scrabble concept here, because words are important and frameworks are important. And I wanted to come up with something that could help guide the conversation, so to speak. So I'm going to be using these keywords to kind of outline where and why a vCISO is the answer for this challenging world that we live in. And I'm going to start with the word virtual. So the word virtual is we throw it around, but if you take a step back, and this is something I spent some time trying to figure out how to articulate, because if I want to explain something to for example, my parents, what's a virtual CISO? Well, they aren't going to quite really grasp what a virtual CISO is. So I took a step back and I started thinking about real world scenarios that could be transcribed into this virtual element. So if you think about the gym experience, the exercise club gym experience. You know, every town probably has one. Most of them have one. You know, it's a standard experience. It's you have standard equipment. There's standard expectations. You're expected to show up, drive to the location, use the equipment, get that exercise experience out, track various different aspects of your health. And there's a lot of positive things that can occur there. You know, there's motivational aspects. You know, you have a team there that works with you in that exercise program. There's the enhanced environment and enhanced perks like the sauna, and maybe there's free drinks and free food, and you might even have an assistant or a coach that's helping you out. And ultimately, you know, that exercise experience, it works for a lot of people. That's why these gyms exist. But how do we virtualize that experience? What would a virtual gym look like? And what would be the perks of having that virtual experience? So I don't like to go to a gym. My experience is actually, and I'll pull this out here, I'm not selling these, by the way. This is just an example. So I use an Oculus, and it's a virtual reality headset. So why not just think about how this applies in the virtual world? I use this Oculus as my exercise experience. What I use it for is I mainly stick with a program in here called Beat Saber. Beat Saber, if you've never heard of it, it's a game that you literally will hold wands like this, and you will swipe at, in a virtual world, blocks that are heading at you in time to the music or the song that's provided. So I want to just walk through a little bit of what virtual means in this world, and think about this in the context of a virtual CISO. So for me, it's a value proposition. I use this because I don't need to go to a gym. I don't need to take the time to go to a gym. I can just put this on and use it when I want to use it. I can set my own strategy, my own vision. I can turn it into my own experience. It's not tied to a standard program, so to speak. It's my own, and I get a lot of value out of this because it's what I've defined as my exercise experience. It is independent. I can take this anywhere. I'm autonomous with this. It allows me to build my own song, so to speak. And I've also, I'll say, jailbroke the device to make it my own independent experience. I have 500 some songs in there, and every time I use it, it's uniquely mine. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it's also a remote experience. And if we're thinking about the virtual CISO has all these things as well. The value proposition of virtual CISO offers parallels with this. They are independent. They are expected to hit the ground running and be independent in pretty much an autonomous way, definitely still working with the teams of the organizations, but they're handed a role and a job and expected to run with it. They are generally remote as well. They know what it means to work with a remote workforce and how to work remotely without having and understand the challenges that come along with that. My Oculus is transient. I can take it anywhere I want to. I can take it with me on vacation. I can go to friends' houses. I can go to my family's place, and I can still have that exercise experience. The virtual CISO is in many ways transient like that too. They are temporary. They move around. They are focused on the job where they need to be focused on the job and not at the gym, so to speak. The uniqueness of a virtual CISO is also something not to be it's be understood, because they are, especially with Optimum, that's one of the things we bring to the table, is that we're specifically and uniquely focused on healthcare. Now, when it comes to my Oculus experience, it's specifically focused for me, and I have my own songs, I have my own experience, I have my own playlist that I use. It's also a bit ambiguous. And when I say that, I mean that when you go to the gym and work out, it's generally you're following a process and a set things that you do, whether it's running or doing walking or whatever else it might be. In my Oculus, the virtual experience in Beat Saber can include campaigns. It can include my own custom playlists. It can include single songs. It can include playing against high scores. It can include playing against other people in real time, remote or local. So it's very much what I want to make out of it. And the same thing for virtual CISO. You can have a virtual CISO as a service. You can have CISO augmentation. You can have an interim CISO, a first time or a trial CISO. So it's very much what you want to make out of it. And then I use the term limited, but I should probably say limitless. If you go to the gym, you're committing a certain chunk of time. With my virtual experience, I can make this as short or as long as I want it to. It takes me 30 seconds to get up and running, and I'm engaged with my exercise routine, and I'm burning calories. The same thing for a virtual CISO experience. It's a per hour. It could be halftime. It could be once a day, once a week. Goal focused, project focused. It's really limitless as to how they're used. So the whole point here is that this is it's really a value proposition for any organization that wants to start to look at how a virtual CISO can be used. So the next few slides, we're going to kind of use that perspective and look at the other keywords of a virtual chief information security opportunity. And I missed mentioning that, but I used the word opportunity because it really is an opportunity for organizations that choose to go down this path. So chief. First up is the commander element. Now, obviously, a CISO comes into an organization as a new person. They're going to have typically a 100-day plan. They're going to be expected to get up to speed with the organization, to meet and greet people, to look at what's there, build some strategy, and start to move on it. If you've ever been a new CISO, you're probably familiar with the concept of a 100-day plan. A virtual CISO is also going to have to come into an organization and quickly come up to speed. Now, the value proposition here is that a virtual CISO typically has done this many times before. They know what it is to step into an organization, to step into a leadership role. We have members of our teams that have been virtual CISOs for 30 plus organizations and have led and been that leader inside of those organizations. So they know what it means. The next three letters here are healthcare industry focused experience. So in the case of what Optimum has to offer is we're providing virtual CISOs who have done this multiple times and have been in multiple engagements with within healthcare organizations. And that brings with it, almost a escalating scale of value for the organization, because each one of those experiences that's virtual CISOs had somewhere else makes that leadership experience and what they can bring to the table much more effective in whatever organization is using them at the time. And then the last piece of Chief, and this is where I have some good examples here, is the financial element. Being a leader and a virtual CISO in an organization, you're going to come across budgetary conversations, new solutions, renewals, those kinds of things that are going to cross over your desk as a leader. Now, one of the benefits of being a virtual CISO is that you know what a product costs. You know when you're being, let's say, fleeced a little bit, ripped off a little bit. You know when that you've seen the setup and the implementations of a product in other organizations. So here's one example. I myself was able to enter an organization, and the renewal time came for the two-factor solution. And I took one look at the two-factor solution, and I know how many people are involved, and it caused me to take a closer look because it was extremely high. And make a long story short, the organization was overpaying. They had too many licenses, and they had the wrong solution as well for their needs. And I was able to cut the cost of that solution down to a fifth of what it was, which was a substantial figure. The same kind of conversation I've had with vulnerability scanning providers. I know how much it costs. I've been in many organizations where I've had to implement vulnerability scanning solutions, and I've been through a few of them. And I know that I know what a good deal looks like. So I stressed that point to the vulnerability provider, and I said, give me something I know I can work with. I know it's supposed to cost, and they did. They came to the table with really good numbers. So these kinds of financial aspects often, I've seen it, and other people, the peers of mine inside Optimum have seen it time and time again. It can almost pay for, if not more than pay for, the cost of having that virtual CISO, just by having that experienced healthcare focused person coming in and providing that oversight to the purchases. And there's been other ones such as SIM overcosting. In addition to that, a virtual CISO, because they've had to do this multiple times, they know how to justify the tools, present the boards, present to the leadership teams about why this particular tool or solution is required, and the benefit that it'll bring to the organization. So on to info, which is more the information side of things. Now, implementation is tricky. This is one of those subjects where there's a lot of successes and failures that CISOs and security leaders in general have experienced. And a virtual CISO, because they've been in so many organizations, and if you look at the kind of the overall general, I'll say, life cycle, what a CISO does is they do an assessment, they discover the gaps, they document the gaps, they provide a remediation plan, and then they implement that remediation plan. Typically, that plan is going to involve the implementation of new programs and solutions and systems to close the gaps. So a virtual CISO, because they are typically operating in 2, maybe 3 different organizations, is going to have the almost double the experience. Not to mention, typically, the virtual CISO is going to be operating in more than their rotation cycle is a little bit quicker. So they're going to have a breadth of information and a breadth of experience with implementations, and that gets increasingly that grows much quicker because we have our peer groups inside of our organization that we can instantly reach out to and ask about these implementations. And these aren't just peers at another organization; these are peers inside of our organization that are there, and we all help each other out. And we're all quick to respond and provide input and provide that extra help when needed. So as part of the implementation process and selecting process of a solution, there's going to be a lot of new technology that virtual CISO is going to get exposed to. Now, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's some next gen, whatever, whether it's remote access or zero trust solutions, that is part of just the reality of a virtual CISO's life. I'm involved in right now 5 different new technologies that I'm implementing across a couple different organizations, and that's you try and implement one major technology in an organization, that you get 2 that gets a little bit more stressful, but the virtual CISO, because they're breaking their time up, can implement even more. And I between myself and my peers, we have a incredible amount of knowledge about the new technologies that are out there. And then there's that fresh perspective. So a lot of organizations will get stuck in a mindset where, well, we've tried this before, we can't do it, or this is the way it's always been. The virtual CISO is going to be able to walk in and recognize those scenarios for what they are, and since they probably have had to deal with that situation before, help the organization through the next steps of what's required. So, I think of firewalls, for example. I had a recent situation where firewalls were the firewalls, and they were implemented, and everybody assumes that they're secure. But a virtual CISO's part of their job is to do assessments and ask questions and trust but verify. So we discover that the firewalls are wide open. That's an opportunity that would have been missed if not for the virtual CISO being there. Another aspect would be privileged account management. That can be very difficult to implement in an organization. There's a lot of things that need to be done in order to make it successful, and you got to lay the groundwork first, look at your accounts, get the organization's support, explain and coordinate the changing of accounts before even implementing a privileged account solution, or it'll be a failure. And it's just that process. But people were hesitant to do that because it failed 3 times or so before. Right now, we're moving through this process, and it's been successful, and we're much further along than it's ever been before, just because I've experienced before, I've implemented it before. And then finally, Optimum. Obviously, you have to throw that word in there, but really it's to optimize or enhance environments. every environment that I have been part of and every environment that the virtual CISOs have been in have their own unique nuggets of enhancements that they have built or managed to implement. I've implemented team practice exercises before, and I know what it means to do that. That's something that increases morale and increases skill sets. So to bring that along with me to every organization I go to, and to see how it works and to implement that is a benefit to every partner and engagement that I'm part of. There's just-in-time awareness that can be added into a firewall. There's certain Office 365 tricks and tips that can be done. There's SIM products and playbooks that can be optimized and shared from the vCISO's experiences, and enhance the security program just with that knowledge alone. So again, the value proposition here is, I'm hoping everyone's seeing that this virtual CISO concept, it's more than just the virtual element. It's all that experience and all the peer assistance that really makes a virtual CISO an attractive opportunity for any organization. So, let's talk about the security aspect of it. So, security operations. This is the operations, the engineering, the incident response side of the house. We've got all the components that make that up. So a virtual CISO, besides all the things we've talked about, the incident response piece of it plays into what a virtual CISO can provide. And I'll use an example here. We had an organization that I'm a part of. They were reached out to by a threat intelligence group. That threat intelligence group shared information that was associated to that organization, but it was also associated to a vendor. That vendor was apparently compromised, and it came through the path of that one organization. So, there's a lot of threat intelligence sharing that goes on in groups like HISAC, but it's a share as you will. There's some hesitancy to sharing, but if I'm responsible for multiple organizations, it's to my benefit and the organization's benefit as well to ensure that the sharing happens at an appropriate level, but happens quickly and can be used to the benefit of the multiple organizations that I'm associated to. Ironically, it was 2 weeks later that another incident came out. This was a ransomware event, and the one organization was notified. The other organization was apparently not, until I started asking questions to the people that were probably going to receive that notification and discover that, yep, they were also notified, but it never would have bubbled up, or it would have been a while before it bubbled up to the security stack. And at that point, we were able to react to that scenario and turn off connections and stuff in multiple organizations. Now, the enterprise focus, which is the business focus, this is an aspect of a security team and a security process that is important because it's the business, and enabling the business, ensuring the business maintains its capabilities is a big part of an enterprise level security program, especially for, and I'll use an example of segmentation. Segmentation is so hard because especially if you're using the firewall segmentation across entities and things like that, it's very hard to implement because you don't want to break the business, but it's very likely that you're going to break the business. So there's a lot of hesitation to go down that path. And it takes knowing the right steps to do that. So one of the things that virtual CISOs can bring, especially those who have had that segmentation experience, and even if they haven't had it themselves, they probably have been through an organization that's developed it. They'll be able to help implement that in a way. And I'm pretty confident that I could walk into pretty much any organization and probably shave off a good year of time and frustration of a segmentation project just because of the experience that I had. And this just doesn't apply to segmentation. This applies to almost any implementation or project that will come down the path. I used PAM, privileged account management, before. The same concept there applies. That's a business impacting security solution that's applied. It'll impact the enterprise. But if I know the landmines that are there, I can help ensure that we can avoid landmines in the organizations that I help drive through that process of implementing whatever solution it is. And if I don't have it, my peers do. Again, it's not just about the virtual CISO that's there, it's their peer group and the broader firm that can help support the initiatives being asked for from that virtual CISO. And then finally, the compliance side. So this could be, you think about frameworks. Implementing a framework is also a very difficult thing to do. But there are the virtual CISOs that do this, have done this, and have been able to actually implement it. And one of the aspects about doing the assessments is typically it's associated to a framework of sorts. It could be the CIS, it could be CSS, it could be NIST, it could be whatever, but they're similar enough that speaking the context and the language of the framework is a skill set unto itself. And the more that virtual CISO or virtual CISOs do this, they get experience doing that. And like I said, we've got some virtual CISOs that have been through 30 organizations, so they've crossed over and they know the challenges of implementing a framework. There's also the breach scenario. Nobody wants a breach, but virtual CISOs have probably a higher statistical chance. They do have a higher statistical chance of seeing an incident or a breach scenario just because they're involved in more organizations over a period of time. Now, typically, again, they're splitting time. They're a shared resource, but that means that each one of those organizations that they're associated to could have an incident, and then that virtual CISO is guiding typically the team through the remediation and the restoration process of that situation. And then finally, for opportunity. So the virtual CISO is really an opportunistic opportunity for an organization that uses it. I know opportunistic can kind of have a negative connotation to it, but really it's not meant to in this case. And I think virtual CISOs recognize that because they know they're there to serve the needs of the organization that they're engaged with. And they also are there to serve that specific need. So, that could be something as simple as doing a risk assessment to prove out that a certain area of the organization needs assistance, like Office 365 or a vulnerability program has some gaps. But it could be something as big as our entire security team just quit. We need somebody to come in instantly to hit the ground running and rebuild a security team. If you try and hire a security team just quits, well, there's going to be some challenges there that are just beyond the security team that need to be understood. But it's an opportunity, again, that a vCISO can really bring a lot of value to the organization that is in that scenario. Next up is a point of contact. So, as we've discussed, that CISO role can be expensive. It doesn't need to exist as a full-time CISO in every situation. If you think about the critical pieces of what a CISO does, it's incident commander, it's providing strategy, it's providing some guidance. In a smaller organization, that can be limited to a smaller number of hours. So they could just be a point of contact for that time in need. And then finally, a virtual CISO can be a pilot of sorts. Does the organization need a CISO, a full-time CISO, or can they use a part-time CISO? By leveraging the virtual CISO services, it gives those organizations a chance to really pilot that concept and to test out whether that CISO role is right for the organization and how it will look. And also help determine where that CISO could live within the organization, whether it's a technical or more of the legal side or a business side. It allows the organization to play a little bit with that role before committing to a full-time CISO. So this is something that in my research, it kind of caught my attention. And it's just a point to ponder. The average CISO search is about 6 months. The average tenure for a CISO is 18 to 26 months. So it's a pretty short time frame for a committed role that an organization tries to incorporate into their leadership team. And there's many reasons for that. I'm not really going to go too much. And I think if you're a CISO, you understand the challenges that cause CISOs to move on. But that's the statistical reality. Now, what if that particular reality was used and kind of flipped on its head for the benefit of the organization that instead of committing to the CISO model, they committed to a virtual CISO model. We've talked about all the different benefits that a virtual CISO can bring to the table. The vast knowledge, the experience, the peer groups they work with, the implementations, and the way that they have already experienced a lot of things that are needed to be known and quickly be able to react to, like incident response and breach scenarios. So if you can rotate through virtual CISOs, you're getting the added value of each of those virtual CISOs, each of their perspectives, each of the knowledge and experiences they bring to the table, each of the enhancements and the optimums that they can help deliver to an organization. And over time, I would have to say there's a case to be made that rotating virtual CISOs through an organization can ultimately bring more value to that role than CISOs themselves. Now, as I said, it's a case that can be made. I think there's a conversation that can be had, but I just want to throw that out there, especially as we've been talking about the many different value propositions that a virtual CISO brings. It's something that I think is at least worth mentioning. So, it's not all perfect for virtual CISO. There are some realities as well that exist. A virtual CISO is virtual. My Oculus, it is limited. It's not going to give me strength testing and strength capabilities like a gym would if I'm lifting weights. So just recognizing what a virtual CISO is, and not to say a virtual CISO can't be a full-time role, but they are virtual. They're generally a contracted type of role. Second, there's going to be conflicts, and again, this is understood up front. Being clear and having communication around this helps just keep this as a reality, not as a negative, but just as a reality. And that a virtual CISO may be responsible for more than one environment. If there's an incident or something major going on in one of the engagements, that may require some of that time that could be pulled across from and the focus being put on that engagement. Now, when there's an incident in two locations, it just, again, it's communication. It's happened to me. It happens to probably most virtual CISOs, and it's just time balance. There's also the potential for that insurgent perspective. And again, if an organization communicates the clear expectations and has the leadership support, and all that is clearly known going in, this isn't a problem. But that is part of the organization's responsibility. Make sure that the virtual CISO has the runway to do their job. In the same way that suitability is, you want to bring the virtual CISO in and make sure that they are enabled to do the job so they can fulfill that role. And then finally, a virtual CISO is going to be objective. They're going to come in and call that elephant out for being the elephant in the room that everybody's been ignoring. That is really what one of the roles is. So again, it's just a matter of expecting that and realizing that these are all good things, that they're coming to the table, but with communication and with clearly defined objectives. These are just simple realities to be aware of. And finally, what does a day in a life for me look like? Well, at an abstract level, it's a life cycle. It is a risk assessment, typically followed by implementations, followed by program strategy build, and getting those solutions in to close the security gaps. On a day-to-day basis, every virtual CISO probably they do it. They do it differently. I will typically split my day in half, with one half going to one engagement, the other half going to the other engagement, with a lot of crosstalk in between. I mean, there's still the same old things that I've been doing for years. It's just wearing a little bit of a different hat. There are all the one-on-ones, there are all the meetings, there's all the project plans, there's vendor communication, there's policy build, there's strategic build, there's presentation build. It's just kind of split up between two different parts of the day. And it helps me because I have one engagement that's on the East Coast and one that's central. So that's just how it works for me. But ultimately, one of the aspects is I love doing this virtual CISO stuff because it is fully engaging. My day is full. My day leaves me feeling fulfilled. And I know that I'm helping organizations out. I'm moving the bar. My time is not wasted at all. If anything, it's just very full and fulfilling. And the passion it's a great way for me to use my skills and keep me passionate about what I'm doing. So I think most virtual CISOs fall into the same camp. They like this work. They love helping organizations secure, and especially within healthcare, it's helping patients, and it's helping establish a secure community for better patient care. So to close it out, if you are a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan, you'll probably recognize the number 42. If you're not, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has established 42 as kind of like the universal number for the answer to everything. And purely coincidentally, when I put these numbers into Scrabble, the word score came up to 42. So I'm not saying that vCISO is the answer to everything, but maybe a vCISO is actually the answer to everything. And on that, I'm gonna end the presentation. If there's comments or questions, I'd love to hear them. If you want to reach out to me at Optimum, please feel free to do so, or on LinkedIn, however you'd like to get a hold of me. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Well, Seth, it looks like we do. Thank you for, we do have one question for you. It says, how is the CIO, CISO roles blending in, and what does the future hold? It's a kind of a two-part question. That's the first part. The second part, we're finding that the inefficiencies from a Cisco reporting outside of IT is pretty clear, and all blame coming to IT.
Okay, let me go back to the first one. So if you could rephrase it, I don't see that here, so you probably have that list there.
Oh, sure. Okay, it says, how is the CIO/Cisco roles blending in? And what does the future hold? That's the first part.
So this is my opinion. I think the question is basically asking, how are the CIO and the CISO roles blending? And there's a couple of schools of thought I've heard. One is that the CISO role could end up becoming the CIO role, because security is integrated into everything, and it's security. It has to be integrated into most everything these days. And the CIO role traditionally has been mainly focused on the implementation of technology and the information side of the house. That's just one view. Whether that plays out or not, I don't know. There's also back to the point of the deputies and the virtual CISOs. There may just be some further breakdown of the specific roles and the leadership required within those silos. The second question?
It was kind of more like of a statement. They were saying, we are finding that the inefficiencies from a Cisco reporting outside of IT is pretty clear, and all the blame is usually coming to IT.
Yeah, and I would agree. The CISO role is not, and again, this is my opinion. So I could, we could probably have conversations about this around those after conversation get-togethers, which we don't have the opportunity these days. But a CISO role, if it isn't aligned into a technology stack, is going to lose some effectiveness because there is so much technology there. Now, a CISO role is also, it's becoming more of a business role too. So, but the interesting part is that business relies so much more on technology nowadays, and it's only becoming more reliant on technology. So to try and to ignore that fact is, I think your organization be setting itself up from for some challenges if everything becomes a financial. So CISO could report the CFO. If it's only about finances, then the first question out of the mouth, the first question from that perspective is going to be, what's the cost of doing it and what's the cost of not doing it? It's an important question, but the CISO in an information world can also recognize that there's subtler costs of not doing something. So if you're not implementing I'll use the example of a ServiceNow solution. If you're not implementing a ServiceNow solution because you're worried about the potential of encryption of a piece of field, well, if you don't have asset management and you don't have a centralized change control and you don't have a centralized way of tracking IoT devices, for example, and marrying all that together, there's a greater risk there from an information perspective than there is about the encryption of the field. So balancing it is becoming more of a technology question and a married business question. And if it's in a CFO world or a legal world, and they don't have that full perspective of how technology can help broadly secure an environment, I think there is a potential of losing some of that that bigger perspective.
Okay, and I see that that was all the questions that we had in our Q&A box. Anyone else? Is there anything else before we wrap it up?
I hear. Thank you for the opportunity. As I said, this has been entertaining, and it was worth my time just to even take a step back and think through some of this.
Thank you again to Optimum Healthcare IT. Thank you all for joining us, and everyone have a great afternoon.